Thank you so much for joining us for our second annual diversity panel, Removing Roadblocks to Diversity. Please feel free to grab lunch. We're going to get started. I'm Jessica Hoffman, Senior Marketing Manager for Black Hat, and I'd like to introduce our moderator, Kelly Jackson Higgins, Executive Editor of Dark Reading. She'll be leading our panel today and introducing our panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Hi, I'm Kelly Jackson Higgins, Executive Editor at Dark Reading, and this is the second year that Black Hat has held this event. Last year in 2015, we talked about how to empower women in security. We talked about some of the challenges and solutions to helping bring more women in the industry, and we had panelists who kind of shared their journeys and insight. But this year we decided to look at it through a broader lens of diversity, so women and minorities. Same issue, why there's so few of them when there's so many jobs out there waiting to be filled. What can be done to sort of remove roadblocks that might be impeding the hiring and recruiting of these people? And I've got a group of speakers here who are more than experienced in this area to talk to you about their knowledge and experience in this space. So I'm going to do a quick intro for each of them, and then I'm going to let them tell you a little about themselves so I don't read their bios and be kind of boring. So to my immediate left here is Jamisha Fisher, who's Security Operations Engineer at GitHub. Chensi Wang, Chief Strategy Officer of Twistlock. Rebecca Brown, Threat Intelligence Lead Global Services at Rapid7. And Angie Leifson, SOC Analyst at Insight Enterprises, and also a Black Hat volunteer. She's been for 3 years, I think, doing Black Hat volunteer. So if you guys could each just say a little bit about what you do, how you got here in security, and then we can go from there and we'll get into our discussion. So I'll start with Jamisha.
Hi, I'm Jamisha. I'm currently a security operations engineer at GitHub. And how I got there is that I was just very passionate about two things. One is operations, the other is security. And for years I had been working on the operational side, but security was always following behind. So I'm very excited that GitHub has given me the chance to put it more on the forefront, which is what I've always wanted to do.
I'm Chensi Wang. I work for this company called Twistlock. We're a container security, DevOps security company. For many years, I was a research analyst at Forrester. I covered lots of security markets, and one of the things I covered was application security, and it was really always very difficult to get organizations to adopt application security. I'm now with a vendor that essentially try to build application security from the get-go, so I'm very excited about that. I'm also the founder of Equal Respect Initiative. Some of you got the pin, Equal Respect pin. This is a t-shirt we made. I have some stories about equal respect later, but now I'm just stop here.
I am Rebecca Brown. I am the Threat Intelligence Lead at Rapid7, and I work with our products and our services team to help them understand attackers, how they operate, and what defenders can do to stop those attacks. I actually came into the tech world from the military, where I did military intelligence, and did not ever think I was going to be doing security, computer security, because I started out as a Chinese linguist, but turns out that those language skills were actually helping us identify and stop attackers. So I took a sharp left turn into security. They threw me into all sorts of classes, and I absolutely loved it. And I was always interested in the way that my analytic and my intelligence mindset worked with security. And so what I try and do now is help people across the board, whether they're a SOC analyst or a CISO, they all have to make decisions about security. And I love being able to kind of provide some of the background and information on threats and attackers and how they can do that.
Hi, I'm Angela Leifson. I'm a SOC analyst at Insight. Insight Enterprises is an MSP, but my division, I work with clients and I make sure that their networks are secure as much as possible, react to the threats that they're having based on rules that we've built. I also have a background in 2 degrees. I just decided to study network security and technology forensics. Both of those kind of give me an equal bearings on if someone were to attack, what are the tracers left behind? How can I forensically find this? And to the fully honest story of how I got into security, I was 11 years old and I played video games with Russ Rogers. And he's big in the industry. He got me interested, he talked about it. And so from 11 years old, I dreamed that I could be in security and I could do all these great things. And so now I'm starting those beginning steps as an analyst to make those dreams reality from being an 11-year-old kid.
I did not know that about you. That's very interesting. As you can see, we have some interesting perspective and all types of backgrounds here, which is what we wanted to bring to the table. So to kind of frame the discussion, I feel like we've been having this discussion for so many years now, year after year. Oh, there's only 10% women in the industry. Doesn't changing, the numbers are staying flat. What's going on? Why are women leaving the industry? Why the lack of diversity? What can we do about it? So it seems like we talk about it and not much changes. Just some quick data points. I know ISC Square's last report, I know they're doing a new one now, but still had women at 10% for the past 2 or 3 years, so that hasn't changed. Yet you see women like these women who are accomplished in the industry sitting up here, so it just makes you wonder what's happening. It's even worse for women of color. In the computer-related industry, we don't have it broken down by cybersecurity, but African American women represent only 3% and Latina women only 1%. So it's still we're still a very small part of the industry. Meantime, as you may already know, and you're going to see today, there's influential women in this industry, and they're playing key roles in shaping industry and technology. So we need to, I think, trumpet that a little bit more. And I want to learn from these guys today and let you guys learn from them as well about what they see happening out there. So one of the topics that came up, and Jamisha wrote a column for Dark Reading earlier this year that sort of brought it to the front. I hadn't really even thought about it, but was this whole idea of how cybersecurity positions and job descriptions are sometimes written in such a way that they preclude women and the minorities. They're not written to draw in these folks. So a lot of times they just don't apply, or they don't have they don't feel like they have the requirements or the experience to apply, so they just don't. So that to me was a real eye-opener. I hadn't actually thought about it that way. I'm not a hiring manager, so I didn't know, but whether there's this sort of inherent bias in the hiring side of things in job descriptions. So I wanted to start with Jamisha. I'm going to put you on the hot seat because you're the one that opened this topic up to me. So tell me a little bit about what you see there, why that's happening, and examples you can share.
I can actually give personal experience to that because, as I said in my intro, this is actually my first security-focused job. If all the previous jobs I've been doing up to this point have either been for security companies because I've done operations because I have the security background, or it's because it's proven useful to the company that I do have the security background. So I've never been hired at a company until now because of my security background. It's mostly been for the operational background, and security is kind of the cherry. And I remember post Google trying to search for a junior security position, and they were like, yeah, we don't have those out here. We don't have those anywhere. I remember trying to find positions for somebody else who was looking for a junior position, and though they weren't a minority, it was still yeah, those things don't exist. For security, it seems like that there are only certain avenues. It's either you get in because of who you know or what offensive hack you can do, or you get through the military. So it takes out a huge group of people who either the military is one way, but not everybody wants to go into the military or have a military career. So that just leaves, the non-military route, which is who you know and who, either through networking, and if you're in the middle of nowhere, you can't network, or, you may not have the money to buy the training needed to do security and get that, competitive edge. So where does this lead people who don't have the money, who might be in the middle of nowhere and want to get into security, but don't have the money to train because, they're a single mother with 2 kids. It's something that I don't think the security industry as a whole has empathy for.
Jency, what do you see on your end? You're on the hiring side of things too. So what do you?
So I've obviously been on the being hired side, and also now I'm actually on the hiring side. I do see lots of inherent biases in writing of the job description and in proactively reaching out to candidates. I truly believe many companies, when they write a job description, they actually have a person in mind. They know a person, SOC analyst, it's going to be a guy with a ponytail, whatnot. And they write based on what they had in mind, which is very unfortunate, because if they had somebody coaching them how to write a job description that is more inclusive, they probably would have gotten more qualified candidates from different genders and different walks of life. And I try to do that myself, but I hope I've done a good job. But those things are everywhere. And I think if you are in the hiring side, or you have a relationship with people who are on the hiring end of things, having a conversation and really help them understand that inherent bias is not because they are intentionally trying to do something that is discriminatory, but inherent bias is something that we need to be aware of, and really heighten awareness will help all of us.
Have you seen this as well, Rebecca? On your
I have on both sides, but it's one of those things I never really put two and two together until we started talking about it. When I did, I went the military route, but when I left, and I had spent, the whole last 6 years of my military career doing cybersecurity and doing some really great things, really cool people. I learned a lot. And when I went to go find jobs where I could do similar work, that top requirement was, computer science degree. And I don't. I think we're all friends here. I actually have a Bachelor of Arts degree, International Relations. And again, you talk about bias, it's like, oh, it's shameful to admit that to my friends in the community. It's like, oh, yeah, got a BA, guys, oh, yeah. But it is something that you just expect. And when you put that on the resume as a requirement, whether or not that's what you need, whether you need somebody who has a computer science degree or you need somebody who has a math degree. There's actually far more women in science and math programs in general than just computer science. But when you have that as a requirement, a lot of people won't even apply. And the fact is, it could be not even what you're looking for. When I was on the other side, and when I went to go hire a threat intelligence team, I started interviewing people. Our recruiters went out and sent me resumes and started bringing people in, and none of them were who I was looking for. They all fit a very stereotypical role. And I said, well, how are you getting these people? How are you finding them? And I looked at the job description, and I think they copied and pasted from another role. They hadn't even given thought into what we were trying to do in our teams and the sort of background we were looking for, education experience, or even the fact that working on a team was very important to me. And so talking to the recruiters and just sitting down and helping them realize, yes, this is a security role. But here is what I actually need for this team, and it's different from other teams, and it's a role where diversity with backgrounds and with different education and different outlooks and different mindsets is very, very important. So if you just put one job description out and expect to find the type of people who will actually build that kind of team, you're never going to be successful.
Yeah, something that I like to highlight from you is a lot of times in job descriptions, it doesn't really highlight on things that matter, like how well do you function on a team. Most people are never single point of failure with their company. It's not something we like to do in security. So how well can you work on a team? I guess another thing that I really appreciate coming from the other side is my supervisor, who recently left my company. She was one of the main points that started our SOC division. And so she kind of had a lot more flow into her requirements. I'm the only one on a team of 3 that has degrees. Everyone else worked through the company. They came through that. And I actually work with another female, which is nice. But who my supervisor was, is she was more forward thinking, and it was more of, okay, I can teach technical skills. These things can be taught, and I don't need a degree. If you have these certifications, it also proves a different, form of education. It's not just based on a degree. Yes, they're great, but certifications also means that you have more specialization with certain, vendors, products, that kind of thing. So just that inherent bias does exist, but it's becoming, she was 22, 23. So as the younger people are coming up, it's nice to see that there are people who are more open and just, they want people passionate. That's a big part of it. It's not just, I can do 2 + 2 is always going to equal 4, but how passionate are you about that addition? So that's a really big part of it, is just thinking forwardly of where is your passion, where are you as a team player, more so than just your technical abilities.
I'm going to ask you, Jamisha, because I think we talked about this before as well. Mm-hmm. Are there certain job requirement skills that are actually, that do preclude minorities and women, per se, in terms of I know you and I talked about even security tool knowledge that were in some job descriptions that maybe weren't accessible to some minority groups or even
Yeah.
women, not
Like-
knowing about them being available to train for.
Exactly. Like it's kind of getting better now. Cisco's kind of getting better at kind of letting their training flow to inner city schools. Like I was actually one of those kids who benefited from Cisco certification training, and we just had some students, some young black men and black women who came from Kansas City who visited the GitHub office, and they're like, yeah, we're doing Cisco like training too. So it's starting to get there, but like in general, like once you get the higher up, yes, we're focusing on the kids, but what about those people in middle age who are wanting to make that career switch? They can't, again, it goes back to the things that they can't afford, you know, the training unless they're doing a job for it. Well, you can't get the job unless you have the training. So it's kind of the chicken and egg problem that you're running into. And, you know, I'm seeing it kind of more and more, especially as more and more people are asking, so how do you get into security? And it's like, it's hard to get those tools. Like even in college, I remember like seeing some of the ISO standards, like those you have to buy and they're pretty expensive. So it's like the cost, again, you hit the paywall of security where, you know, you can't learn the compliance part that you need to learn about, you know, doing operational security or, you know, some of the standards without having money. Or, you know, money or time.
That's a good point.
Great. So I came up through traditional academia route. I have a computer science degree, I have a computer science PhD, and after my PhD, I got a job as a professor at Carnegie Mellon University teaching computer science, a very traditional computer science career. When I was at Carnegie Mellon, one of the top computer science schools in the country, we had a great artificial intelligence program. One of the things we observed with that program, we got tremendous success hiring graduate students out of liberal arts majors because they look at things differently. Psychology major, for instance, had a great different perspective on how artificial intelligence algorithms should run based on their view of human interactions, for instance, and HCI, human computer interaction as a field benefited tremendously from the infusion of talents from other fields. So those kind of things are starting to happening. Computer security, I actually personally think we would benefit greatly from psychology majors, from other majors that have a view on human behavior that the core computer science majors may not have had. So that's one thing that I'm trying to bring out as well in some of the stuff, some of the work I do. I have a column that we just started, Equal Respect column with IT Security Planet. We're going to be writing exclusively on diversity-related issues for women in tech, and not just women in security. One of the things I think, sorry, just give me one more minute to finish the thought, that the way we communicate about computer security and computer science is very one-sided. So we read about hackers, we read about those guys sitting in the dark room and hacking into computer systems. It's hard for a young woman to relate to that, I think. There's no emotional connection to the work that's doing. There's a conference called Enigma, which is, I'm on the PC for, it's a new security conference put together by Usenix. The goal of that conference is to give highlights to top computer science research that has a social impact. Last year was the first year, and one of the talks that was so ingrained in my mind was a professor in Ohio State University. He's doing a project with the World Bank. The World Bank every year gives out hundreds of millions of dollars of loans for economically deprived regions for development projects, right? Roads, infrastructures, whatnot. A high percentage of those projects were defrauded because they are fake organizations set up to bid on those projects. And once they get the bids, they take the money and they run. what you see is criminal groups, international criminal groups behind these projects, and they would set up a fake organization here in Russia, set up another fake organization there in, I don't know, Kenya, and they move from place to place. So what he did was, he has a data science project that he took corporate registration data, he took all the publicly available data, locations, whatnot, and he churned through his algorithms, and he was able to help the World Bank saving millions of dollars by data science fraud detection. And I was sitting in the audience listening to the talk, I'm like, this is great social impact work. Right? I can see a lot of people, men or women, being emotionally related to that kind of work. And we need to bring out that kind of projects a lot more than just somebody sitting there hacking a system. So that's my mission.
Yeah, and I can agree with that, especially just in the general technical space. The last company I worked at, I was on the operations team, and I like it because two of my coworkers, they do not have like computer science degrees. They both have Bachelor of the Arts degrees, and they're operations engineers, and they're like some of the best guys that I've ever worked with. But it's also the thing about social impact. Like I was talking with a friend last night going over talks, and it's like so many people are about the hacking aspect and the offensive aspect, but nobody's about the defensive aspect, the aspect that actually does have the most social impact. And I'm glad that there are more conferences that are focusing on the social impact and the defensive side of things, because that's the most people affecting change that you can have. And so I think if we have more discussions on those points, that we can really draw people in, as well as, reaching out to people who are not just computer science majors, because an important component of security is that you have to work with people. Like in order to get anything or a security policy or something technical, you have to talk with a person. And sometimes, computer languages can't save you from that.
And I think it's important to note, I've heard a lot of people say, well, we need more women in tech because we need them to bring in those softer skills. There are lots of men who have those same skills. And it's not just about, bring women in to bring those. We need to just bring those skills in general. Because, like you said, it makes our approach, we change our approach. We don't keep the same mindset that has unfortunately kind of gotten us to the place where we are today, where we have so many security issues still. I think we definitely need to bring more people in to change that. And for the education question we were talking about, I actually had a very interesting experience this summer looking for summer camps for my children. We're up in the Seattle area. There's all sorts of different camps, and okay, what can I do? They can learn a different language. They can go to Minecraft. They can, they have Raspberry Pi camps for kids. And so I was looking through all of these things, and the first thing I noticed was they're very expensive and they're very exclusive. And if we weren't like in the hub of tech in Washington State, there would not be much available to them. So I think that's one area we can improve. But then the second thing, and Jamisha, you made a very good point, is it's not just kids, because as I'm looking through all these camps and kind of talking through with my parents who live in the same area, my dad's an electrical engineer, and he's always worked on hardware, and he's working on a lot of projects now where he's hearing more and more about security. And so as I'm looking at these camps for kids like 6 to 11, he's like, oh, do they have those for grown-ups? Like, oh, can I go to security summer camp? And again, there's not a whole lot of options for that as well. Again, unless it's incredibly expensive and he would have to take time off work or ask his work to send him. But I think there's a lot of improvements we can make there, and a lot of it is making them available and removing some of the, the restrictions based on just that cost and location.
Well, and that's too, a part of it is a big group of where I went to university at, which was UAT. It's a place in Tempe, Arizona. So a big part of it is when the alumni graduate, we still have a lot of access to a lot of the core stuff that's still happening at the university. The nice thing is that because of that kind of community, that kind of relationship, the alumni give back to the students a lot. There's different groups, there's DEF CON groups all over the world, or I'm pretty sure it's all over the world. There's definitely a lot in the United States, but that group, a lot of alumni feed into, and they have also taken that that and they teach back to the students. And then those students, as they grow up through their seniority, teach back to others. So being part of the CA program here, a lot of it's actually fed from my university. So it was really cool. I graduated in December and started my own career. So it's been very hard to just go back and, spend more time at the university. But coming here this year and being a lead for the first time out of my 3 years and tenure here, it was cool to be, wow, there's a lot of kids here that they need this mentorship, whether it's because of the area that you're in or there's a lot of things online, but to find those mentors and to build that community is huge. And we just don't think about it. We're like, I need to get paid to get trained. I need to do these. And we don't necessarily think there's a lot of different, there's cyber IT, there's Professor Messer videos, there's videos on YouTube. There's so many things that even though studying those skills and trying to build those environments as hard as they are and as expensive and time consuming as it is and difficult, we can do it. It's a huge commitment and it's hard to balance where your life is and where your work life is, and a lot of times it becomes one. But the same thing going back into a lot of the social things is a lot of, like for me, is I have student debt that's ridiculously expensive. And something that I've noticed is that so many people are targeting students who are coming from no place from a job yet, that they're like, here's loan forgiveness. It's not real. It's a fraudulent project going on. And so a lot of security is that got me interested in, especially growing up, was how does this affect me as growing up? Something that you always thought about is don't talk to strangers. Well, okay, networking is all about talking to strangers, but how secure can you be with that when growing up? I played video games with a man when I was 11 years old and it changed my life. That could have happened to somebody else and it happened in a negative way. So security is, how can I use this big tool, it's this whole open world, how can I be secure? Make it personal. You don't want some child, whether it's man or female, going to these camps and using it for something malicious. You don't want them to be, a victim of something malicious. And so having those real application of what can I do that's real? What can I do to make this impact real people and to share my knowledge with other people is huge. It's a big thing to give back to the people around you. Even in conversations with a lot of my friends, I'm the only technical person, but to sit there and explain even at a very high level of what I do, it blows their minds. And they're just like, wow, this is huge. This is impressive. What you do is important. Make it important. Make it matter to other people.
And then being able to take those kind of the non-traditional education, the non-traditional approach, and be able to put that on your resume and have somebody say, yes, that did give you skills. It might not have been the traditional path, but you learned. I think that is also really important.
I want to drill down a little bit. I'm glad you brought up the liberal arts major. I'm an English major. Have been hiding it for a long time in the industry.
Okay,
I can come
all
out
right.
proudly, Bachelor of Arts English. But I remember early on in the industry, I was embarrassed to tell people that. I would just not say, oh, I went to college. I wouldn't say what I studied. They would think I didn't know anything. But one thing I've learned in this industry is there are a lot of skills that are important. And you touched on a lot of them: psychology, linguistics, communication, creativity. That's a huge part of hacking, is creativity, obviously. Yeah. So what I'm wondering, what you guys, if you were to write, I think my mic is weird. If you were to write the ideal job description that would bring in more diversity from those skills that women might have or minorities might have that didn't have the hard tech, computer science background, what would that job description look like? I think that would be really interesting to hear. Jamisha, do you want to start with that? What were some of the things you'd like to see on that?
Oh man, that's a difficult question. For me, it's somebody who is curious and likes taking things apart and wants to work with a team. Those are kind of the top three things. If somebody has a curious mind and they like taking things apart and asking questions from other people, and can work in a team as well as work by themselves, somebody who's ambitious and driven, that's who I'd want to look for.
I think curious minds, definitely. And somebody who asks questions and try to explore answers. Another thing I typically look for is resourcefulness, not just knowing everything, but knowing where to find a resource to solve a problem. I think a lot of women are really good at that. I think about what you have to do at home to solve a problem and bring that skills to workplace. I think is really, really important.
I think being okay with asking questions, it kind of ties to the curious mind, but being able to say, hey, I don't know this thing, tell me more, and actually learning and applying that is really important. Because Angie pointed out, there's a lot of skills you can learn on the job as long as you aren't afraid to let someone know you don't already know how to do it. I think we run into a lot of that in our industry where it's almost like at a high level, we kind of look down at people if they don't know everything. This is a huge field. It is so complex and there are so many different aspects. Nobody can be expected to know everything. But if you are afraid to ask questions, then that is going to hold you back. And I've also found that the people who ask questions, try and learn more, they're more willing to reciprocate. If somebody comes to them and says, hey, you're working on this project, I think it's cool, tell me more, they'll share back and they'll start to mentor and teach. And it makes for a really good environment where you're not stuck because of egos. And I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, touching on that, I would say somebody that's more of a mild temperament, working with anyone elitist is very difficult, and so more of your attitude plays into it a lot. A team member, and two things that I think are kind of strange, but a big deal is I'd ask about hobbies, because, you know, I'm a puzzle person. I like figuring out why it works, okay? You could tell me that this works, but why? How else can I do this? Can I replicate this kind of threat? Can I replicate this traffic to see, is it real? And the other one I would say is, how many times do you ask why in a day? Why does this work? Why do we do it this way? Is there a different way? Be innovative. And the best way to start out innovative is always to think, why? We drive on the right side of the road. Why? We, put our right leg in first instead of our left leg. Why? Where is the efficiency? Why do we do the things that we do? Is it just because it's always been? Well, how can we change that? How can we make it differently? And it doesn't start, and if you're always looking at the same course, the same path, and not looking to change it, then you're never gonna see those progressions. I think the other thing is that's really important is to be willing to get aggressive with something. If you, teach back, mentor, but also be aggressive. If you see somebody working with, a Juniper device or some kind of other vendor and you're like, oh, this is really cool, it looks cool. Okay, get aggressive with it. How can I get more training to this? How can I get mentorship? Bother people a little bit. Don't be like super crazy with them, but ask if there's things that you can do, whether it's on your own time or like build the relationships, the community where you could be like, okay, well, you do this. You have your own lab at home or a small lab or a different kind of computer. Can we make some kind of, community here where we can get together and work on these things? And a lot of it's don't be afraid. I think a lot of times where I was at, and I've thought about giving up in my degree, was because I was only female. And I was just like, wow, I'm kind of by myself. I don't really have a lot of friends. These guys are kind of elitist people and they don't really like to talk. And it was very discouraging, but don't be afraid to give up. Don't be afraid to, fail in a lot of ways. And it's scary and it's very difficult. But there's a lot of things that I've tried. And I'm like, okay, this doesn't work for me. What else can I do that's going to work for me? What can I be good at? And I think another thing too is my personal preference is social engineering, like bringing in the psychology to the different things. Social engineering is a huge thing. They always say that your weakest area in your network is your humans. Okay, well, a phone call can change an entire company. How many things can you give away? The social engineering, there's a class here. There's a big area in DEF CON, and it's because of things like psychology. People of diversity, people from different minorities are going to react to questions differently. My upbringing is going to change how I respond to something than anyone else on this panel. So the psychology and understanding, I think, how people work is very good. And so those other skills of what can they bring in really matter. And so it's not just these are the hardcore lines they need. What soft skills do they have? What are your hobbies? Because those things will completely change your vision and your lens into the job.
So how do you get employers to see the value of hiring a more diverse staff? What are some of the things that make it a win for them? And what do you think is kind of holding it back in some cases? And I'd love to hear if you guys have examples at your own companies of what they're doing to help diversify.
Sorry.
No, you can go ahead.
I have to say it's actually really difficult to get qualified resumes. And it's not just women. It's difficult to get qualified resume for men as well. I see a lot of resumes and some of them just didn't cut it. So going back to the question of on the hiring side, what do I do on hiring a diverse staff, right? So I work in a small company today, so it's not a big issue because we're hiring 1 or 2 people. I used to work in a large company where we have a very concerted effort to hire diverse staff because the work culture is just different, right? And so I used to work at Intel Security where the mantra is we're catching the bad guys, we're helping nation state, we're helping national security, we're helping all the kids have a safe life, and those are the mantra. And to bringing a diverse workforce who understands different aspects of this mantra is really important. Now, for a small company like where I am, a lot of times we do have to look for the most qualified candidate. And I try to put in a filter where we don't look for a specific candidate, a specific profile, we look for the most qualified skills. But it's just really hard to get any qualified resume. So LinkedIn has been helpful, right? But going back to what you said, you have to know someone to get a job. I think that is actually a big, big problem for security industry because it's very incestuous. So how do we solve that problem? And you know, at some level, I benefit from it because I know a lot of people, and I've never had to look for a job per se. Job comes to me because I know people. But how do you get in there without knowing a lot of people? And that actually, I struggle with that myself. You know, so like struggle with how to coach someone, and that's, I think, as an industry, we're doing a really bad job.
I think it's also that even from large to small companies, we really should seriously stop focusing on we need the most top qualified people. Because a lot of the time, especially with white men, it's, you know, they're given the reasonable doubt. Even if they're not the most qualified, they're like, well, they have some of the skills and then they can make some of it up on the job. We don't give that opportunity of potential. We don't give that reasonable doubt to women. We don't give that reasonable doubt to minorities. It's something that especially people of color in the technical communities have talked about, where companies will use the excuse, and I'm sorry, use the excuse of, oh, we need we can't find the qualified candidates. We're waiting for them to come through the pipeline. It's like, no, especially the big companies, you guys have the money and resources to train. In fact, you have training programs already to bring those people in. So employers accepting the potential of more than just one concentrated group, I think would bring so much more opportunity and advancement for them.
I agree. So there's a community initiative, nonprofit initiative that's run by Deirdre Diamond. It's called Brain Babe, and she's starting to put together a set of boot camp training for women of different backgrounds. Not necessarily classically trained computer scientist or computer security person, to give them the know-how to enter a field such as computer security or other fields of computer science. I think it's a wonderful thing to do. I think she's just starting. So that's something that if some of you are interested, take a look at or spread the word to folks you know that might be interested. And I think we, Kelly, as an industry, we should do more of those things.
I think on the hiring side, being aware of biases is very important. And everyone wants to say like, oh no, I'm unbiased and I'm objective. But the truth is everybody has biases. It's part of the way our brains function. It's shortcuts we create to help us come to decisions sooner. And if you don't admit that you have those biases, you cannot put anything in place to counteract them. And in intelligence analysis, you always have to be aware of your analytic biases, because otherwise it's going to cloud your decisions. And that's true in the hiring process. Like, I think you made a very good point. If you look at a resume of, a white, classically educated male, your brain automatically treats that differently, and you assume certain things about that candidate, like, oh, well, he's been to this school, so clearly he has this kind of work ethic, and oh, he can do this, and oh, he's had this job before, so he knows these things. Without ever meeting the person, without it being written on the resume, you assume these things. And because of our biases, we assume certain things about women, we assume certain things about minorities, that in many cases aren't true. And I do it myself. One of my biases when I'm looking at resumes is I am hypercritical of other people who come from the military right off the bat. And I'm aware of that bias, and I can overcome it. And especially when I meet people, it's like, okay, no. But it's one of those just sensitivities where I've had bad experiences with people claiming experiences they don't have. And that's colored my interpretation of just a job description. One line on a resume has changed the way I feel about that. And I'm sure everybody has some sort of bias, and especially, when you're looking to hire people, if you're not aware, then you won't get past those, and you'll make snap decisions and move on to the next one. This person isn't qualified. We don't have the time to do the training, when those things aren't true. And it's hard to do that for ourselves, and it's hard to do that for other people in our company, because nobody likes being told, well, hey, I think that you are, your judgment is clouded here. But it's one of those things we just need to accept if we want to be able to make better hiring decisions.
And also, I think it may not be the politically correct thing to say, but I think all of us could go back and take a pass at our resume and to say, have we put in the right words? Because it does pass the first filter. If it passes the first filter, then you may have an opportunity to prove yourself face to face. And I tell everybody I know to do that, because other people are doing it, you should do it too. And if that's something that some of you are interested in getting counsels on, Equal Respect may have senior women can help you.
Something that I was going to chip into is part of it is, I'm sure it annoys a lot of the hiring managers, but even though I don't think that I may be the most qualified, I'll still apply. So if it says, 6 months to a year experience in certain things, if I don't have it, but I still feel confident in my skills, I'll still apply. Don't be afraid of hearing no. If you don't hear anything back from a job company and they tell you no, what are you out? Nothing. But taking those 5 minutes to send in a LinkedIn, question, or to send in your resume, or to have that conversation with the CEO or another company, it's 5 minutes that you could have that chance to make something of yourself, to prove something that you're different. A resume is only a piece of paper, but if you get that chance to go into that interview, something about you could spark their interest, and you are the one getting in there to get your job. And even though only having who you know works in a lot of ways and it can be very powerful, sometimes it still only gets you an interview, and that interview is still on you to make it work. It's for you to wow them. And so one of the biggest things that I ignore is when it says X amount of time of experience. I was in school for 4 years. So that took up a lot of my time. So I don't have that job experience. I come from a small town. I don't have technical skills. I can tell you that I worked a lot of places. I did. I worked for many years before I went to college, but that doesn't mean that I have the tech skills that are needed, but I can still prove that I have a work ethic. I can still prove that I've done these things, and I can prove that I'm a confident person and and then I know my tech, I know my gear, I know what I'm doing, even though I don't have this many months of experience or this many years on a job. And so don't be afraid, even though you may not be the most qualified, still apply. You're not out anything for taking the time. You're going to apply to somewhere else, so you might as well still apply to this. And even on LinkedIn, there are a lot of places that I'm just like, wow, I don't think I'm qualified for this. But if somebody hit me up on LinkedIn, well, maybe there's a reason that they did. So maybe I should take that 5 minutes and apply. What am I out? Time.
That's really good advice, because a lot of young women won't do it.
Yeah.
That's one thing I hear over and over again is women, if they see they don't fit the qualification, they're just not going to apply. They don't take the risk. So I think that's really good advice.
That's really good advice, especially because I'm a person who would benefit of that advice, because when I was searching for internships and I was in college, I made the rare chance. I was like, let me apply to this Google internship. I may not get it. It may not happen. It may not happen at all, but just let me apply and just aim high, because I just, it's there, and who knows? And literally 6 months later, I got an email from a google.com address, and I was like, what is this? And I ended up actually interning at Google. So yeah, that does apply. It may not happen in every case that you end up at a Google, but
If you don't apply, it definitely won't happen.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think another big part of that too is don't be discouraged. It's kind of, a way that I think about getting jobs is kind of like dating. Just because you have an interest, 25% of the time you might not hit, or 75% of the time you might not get what you want or where you're going. But the fact is that if you still stay persistent, you still have a chance. Whereas if you just give up or you don't do it, then you've already said no to any possibility that could come up. I had a friend who graduated, and he was actually out of a job for a year, but he didn't give up. He still was continuing to apply. He was still looking for jobs. He got told more times than I could count, but he still tried. And now he's, he's an application security tester for a company. And so he did get out there, and he finally got a job, and he did really well. It just took him a little bit of time, but he kept the course, and as many times as he wanted to give up, as many times as he got discouraged, he went around his community, he got a pep talk, he got back out there, and he still did it. And now he's made those accomplishments, and now he's finally got experience, he's finally got, the certifications coming up, and now he's making steps to progress even further. It just took some time. And so everything is possible with time. You just can't let yourself, you're your own worst critic, and you always will be. Don't let just because somebody told you no. There are other people out there that will tell you yes.
One thing we haven't drilled down on yet, we've touched on, From the employer's perspective, maybe companies who aren't sold yet on, I have to look at diversity as part of my requirements piece of things. What are the value add benefit stuff that we should be communicating to them, or you as a job candidate should be what is it the diversity bring to the equation in a company? That's what you guys see day to day in your jobs in cybersecurity. What does that do for the staff, the teams? What are some of the skills and benefits?
For me, especially joining GitHub, and one thing I want to point out is that companies shouldn't just be focusing on diversity and getting people of a diverse background in the door. They should also be focusing on their inclusion and keeping them there. Inclusion is important for the retention. Like, let me repeat this. Inclusion is important. Like, it might be even more important than the diversity piece. But I felt so included at GitHub once I got there from the first week on. So much that I kind of felt weird about it. One of the things I texted one of my friends the first week, I was like, this company is so weird. It's like they're so friendly and inclusive that I don't trust it. Yeah. Like, I was just like, I don't know about this, and I've heard about them in the news. I don't know about this, but as time went on, and especially one of the things I talked about Sarah with during our discussion yesterday was that when the shootings happened in the first week of July in Baton Rouge in Minnesota, one of the things that I'm proud that my executive team did was like, okay, we're here for you. We understand. If you need to take a break, if you need to do anything, like take time off, do it. We're here for you. If you need to talk, let us know. Like, they were completely supportive. And for me to feel that as a company employee, not only does it make me want to work harder for you, but it just makes me overall like a happier and more productive employee, because when I don't have to worry about how I'm presenting myself, I can do what I really came to work for, which is my job.
Right. I think that's a really, really important point, right? So the efforts within the workplace culture to retain, not just recruiting, we talked a lot about recruiting, but I see this as a big problem in especially large companies, because it's many different organizations may not be talking to each other. So we were, in my group, we were discussing, Microsoft, right, for instance, has a ton of women's initiatives inside. Lots of money spent on diversity programs in recruiting qualified diverse candidates. GDC last year, Game Developer Conference, Xbox unit put on a after party. They hired scantily clad schoolgirl dressed in schoolgirl outfits to dance on the table for the game developers. Game developers, not just men. There are lots of women game developers, right? So there were a few women developers there. They tweeted, it went viral, and Microsoft had to come out and apologize, right? So what Microsoft said is, we didn't know that group was going to do that. Many companies are going to say that. We didn't know they were going to do that. That's because the diversity efforts internally they have had not made into the core business value of the company. It's a program that sit on the side. They run events once in a while, and the executives show up and they smile warmly. Hey, look, we have diversity in our company. That's not how it works. What it should work is that should be every aspect of your business. In your salary, in the recruiting, in everyday operation, make that into the business process. And I love to discover a few companies actually do it well, and GitHub is probably one of those, and replicate those practices and have them communicated to the entire industry, not just security, but entire industry to cultivate that kind of practice.
I think, go ahead.
I think that idea of addressing issues and addressing problems is really important, because even if your company has a great environment and they have a certain mission, you might have one person within the company, and hopefully they're not in a leadership position, but sometimes they are, who has different views and who can make people feel very excluded and make them feel demeaned. And if that person isn't dealt with, it can mean that all of a sudden everybody's, all the employees' opinions of their job and how they feel and whether they're included can be shaped by one individual. And I see a lot of times where people try and like push that under the rug because we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to address it. They probably didn't mean it. We didn't know it was going to happen. But when things like that happen, it makes everybody else around them who was aware of that situation feel even more excluded. Because now not only has there been an issue, but that now you're told your issue is actually not that important and we're not going to do anything about it. And that's, I think I've known a lot of people who work in otherwise good companies who have left because of situations like that. And you look at them and they have women's groups and they have different clubs and events and they do running and people who like baking can all hang out together. But you have one person who says, well, oh no, you can't do that. And they might say that, but that's not really right. And it can affect the whole company.
Well, and something too that I was going to tie in from both of you is the inclusion and diversity within your staff. It's hard because it starts with us first. A company can't be diversified unless its people are diversified. And so for me, honestly, where I work, there's 3 females that I work with throughout the day out of probably 25 males. And it's very hard for us because we all sit in a room. It's a dark room, kind of like the Batcave. It's really honestly how it feels. It was a fight just to get the skylight on. But so they're very afraid of females. They're just like, oh, I can't say that. I can't joke about that. Oh, I don't know how to talk to her. And so kind of like for us to step up and also get on their level a little bit. There are some things that guys and females that just gets too far, that's fine. But for us not to just, say, come meet us on our level, but for us to rise to theirs and be like, I can do this. I can do your jobs. I can joke with you. I can have a conversation with you. I can hang out with you. If you want to go fishing, I can go fishing too. If you want to work on a car, maybe it's not my thing, but I can do that too. And so even to have those soft skills where you can have those be like, I'm passionate about baking, or I'm passionate about, volunteering. Guys can come and join us on those levels too. And so it's a give and take kind of situation where we do have to be including. Like we have to get included, and sometimes we have to fight for that inclusion by making a weird joke or, finding some weird common ground between us. But we have to fight for it, and they have to fight for it too, because a lot of times guys are scared to talk to females, even if it's at work. And it's not anything strange, it's just, they just don't know how. And so we have to, in some ways, lead in a way to teach them how to come meet us halfway.
I think a lot of people in our industry have like that binary mindset. It's ones and zeros, it is or it isn't. And I think we approach that with diversity as well, where we seem to think like, oh, well, this is the way forward. If we want to have more women in tech, we need to do X, and that's the only thing to do. And that doesn't work because there's multiple paths. There are so many different ways to attract diverse workforces. There's so many different interests and levels of, of inclusion, that to be stuck in the mindset of, there's only one path, and if you're not doing that path, it's, you're wrong. I think that's a very bad way for us to look at things.
I want to shift gears a little bit to the education and training piece of the equation. There was a study a few months ago that looked at, I think it was the top 20 undergrad computer science programs in the country, and only like one of them required a cybersecurity course. It was all computer science, very traditional, and cybersecurity was a sort of an elective class. Now I know at the graduate school level we have cybersecurity programs, obviously, but undergrad it's still kind of rare. There's some schools like Carnegie Mellon and UMBC I know that have good programs. So there's definitely some out there. But what I see talking to young people, because both my kids are in college age and I meet their friends who are going into coding, and I ask them about cybersecurity, they don't know what it is. They're like, well, I want to code. I'm like, what about security? And I try to talk to them and they don't really know much about it. So it seems like there's this still education gap. Now, not that every kid is going to go the traditional route to college, but I'm wondering what you guys see needs to be sort of advanced on the education side, also on the training side for kids who may or may not have the traditional 4-year college path, maybe a community college or other training skills. I think just getting these entry-level people in it seems like a big challenge right now, because there isn't like a traditional educational path, I guess.
I can speak pretty close to that one. So when I was applying for universities, a lot of the things that I found, like in Tempe, where I'm at now, ASU is a big one, but they have cybersecurity. They have computer science with like a certification of network security. It's not their main focus. So when I was applying for universities, there was 2 schools that I found. There was RIT, which was network security and technology forensics, because I wanted to do both. And there was UAT, which is network security and technology forensics. They had both. And any other school that I looked at kind of had one, or it was just kind of like a side certification. And so I think that a big part of it is hard because universities don't have the money to shell out into a lab environment. They don't have the way, they want to teach more theory rather than hands-on, because it's hard with accreditations. It's hard with places trying to figure out exactly what that program should look like, because a lot of people who can teach this and who understand it are still in industry. So it's very hard for them to go, okay, I'm going to go from traveling all over the world, being in these high-level positions, being in these high salaries, to let me step back and be a teacher. So I think that's a big part of it. And so I think that's a good reason why certifications are so popular, is just because a lot of degrees, they can't fund it, because what we do is, and it's so broad. Cybersecurity isn't just, one field. You have pen testing, you have, your blue teams who protect against pen testing, you have reverse engineers, you have incident response, you have SOC analysts. Like, all 5 of those have different, even field sets that you possibly could use, and yet you want 1 degree for these things. And even still, if you're in incident response for 5 years, you can, end up as a pen tester for 12 years. And it's this very weird ebbs and flows channels. And so I think that's a big reason why we have such a hard time in education, and where a lot of it, as hard as it is go find it for yourself. And as frustrating as it is even for me as personally to get involved in security, because I'm so new and I'm so young, and I'm just like, I don't know where to begin, and it's so overwhelming coming to Black Hat, even as a briefings. I can't imagine. I've never been a conference attendant, so I more like help out the guests and things. And we have smaller security conferences back home, but even those things, it's like, wow, this is so just mind-boggling because it's so huge. And try to fit one huge subject matter in one book is a very hard thing, I think, for a lot of universities and education to understand.
That's a good point. Rebecca, you have an interesting path from the education side. Can you talk a little about the military path, and maybe that being an option for some folks as well? Or
Sure. I was incredibly lucky. When I look back on, my very first opportunities, then it almost seemed like, oh, okay, I have to go to school now. But it was so good for me. I enlisted in the Marine Corps right out of high school. Mostly because I wanted something different. I graduated, I worked really hard in high school, and I did all the things and all the extracurricular, and started looking at colleges and thought, like, oh, wait a minute, this is like 4 more years of what I just did, but I live somewhere else. And for me at 18, I was like, well, okay, I'll look at the military. And I joined the military, and I took a bunch of aptitude tests, and they said, we're sending you to language school for 2 years. And I was like, guys, like, I didn't want to do that. But they taught me Chinese Mandarin. And then after that, they said, ooh, and also we're now going to teach you network warfare analysis, because we're having some problems on our networks. Maybe you can help us out. So I went through I almost did 4 years of school in the military, when really that's what I was trying to avoid. But it was an amazing career path. And it was not just did I get that initial schooling and that initial experience, but they have this concept of every year. Every year I got to go back and do refresher training for my language. Every year I got to go back and learn about new technologies and new tools and new applications. And it was this expectation of continued learning. We did lots of on-the-job training as well, informal and formal programs. And it was just really a blessing for me. And, I had my GI Bill, so I started working on, I actually got my degree in international relations. I started working on my master's degree. And this is before they had a lot of cybersecurity degrees, so my master's is in Homeland Security. But it's just, that was the way I thought the world worked. And then I left the military and I came to the industry, and I was like, cool, when am I going to training? And they're like, when are you what? Like, you're going to take vacation and do that? And it was a completely different mindset. And I'm seeing more and more opportunities. Kind of the certification is a great way, because you can kind of pick the specialty. But again, there's still a lot of requirements to do that. And you have to convince your company of the value of doing that, or you have to pay on your own. At schools, the school that I am getting my master's through actually just started their cybersecurity program like 2 months ago, and I was not really do enough of my courses translate? And they said, no way. So that's not an option, but I think it's becoming more of an option. And I really do hope that we as a community can start understanding the value of education and continued education. It's not one and done. Our world does not stay static very long. You have to keep learning and keep training to stay up to date on a lot of these things.
Yeah. I definitely kind of want to add to that. Another way is to kind of do a slight contrast is that the program, actually DePaul was one of the schools that still had a pretty rigorous cybersecurity program. And I was one of the first students to graduate with my degree. My degree is actually in computer security. It has a long name, Information Assurance and Security Engineering. But that was that was just as I was entering the school in 2005. And they were already ahead of the curve because they usually try to hire people from the industry and try to stay ahead of that curve. And I was originally going to go into networking security, but then this major came up and I was like, well, I want to be more well-rounded. So let's go into this. So the good thing about it is that it taught more stuff on the operational and defensive side. So I think that's one way that there's focus is, again, having that focus on the defensive side, the side that gives the most people impact is like, how do we defend for people? Instead of how do we, break things apart? It's like, okay, how do we protect things? Or how do we break things apart and then how do we protect it? Like having those two pieces instead of just the offensive piece. How do we break things? It's like, how do we protect things after we break them? Having and being taught that mindset, especially from the college level, was, very, very essential. And I think it's building and growing more. And DePaul was definitely on the ball of trying to stay up to date and up to, current. Another thing that I think is super crucial that Rebecca touched on was, the fact that we do need more community initiative and local stuff to happen with tech and especially security, especially in the smaller towns, especially in the smaller places. One of the things I like that GitHub is doing is that they're part of the Connect Home initiative, which is basically going out to these smaller towns and smaller communities and bringing technology and having talks about technology and bringing those things to the fore. So, investing more time and money, bigger companies and bigger tech companies doing that, I think will also kind of help supplement that education for people to dive in, whether they're young or whether they're in the middle age. So those were the two suggestions that I would have.
So I don't think, going back to the education side, I don't think the certification program thing is ever going to work with traditional academic institutions. Having sat on some of those committees deciding which programs to have, having a specialty program, master of something, in some of the top tier universities are viewed as a second tier citizen, because what you need is a degree in computer science. You do not need a degree in computer security because that's not how traditional institutions work, and they still think that way. There are specialty programs, master's program around, but they're viewed as a cash cow program, not the top academic program. So I personally think, having been in academia and industry, I think you don't pick up those skills in academia. Don't expect to do it. You get basic training, then you do your computer security training after your bachelor's or something on the job, right? And how to get involved? Having an external network. If you guys don't know, EWF is a wonderful network for women in security. Joyce is right there. Go talk to her. She runs a big national conference. If you go there, you will get the chance to meet lots of senior and women who have been in this industry for many years. And that's one place you can establish an external network. And those people will help you getting opportunities and training on the job for you. Women in security and privacy, sitting there, they run meetups locally, and some of the meetups in some of the hottest tech companies in the Bay Area. And you go to those meetups and you might bump into a job opportunity there. And they also do training in privacy and security. And actually, one thing I forgot to say is we are starting a speakers bureau. We're going to try to place women speakers in different conferences to raise the profile of women speakers. And we'll be placing from keynote all the way to track speakers. And it doesn't matter what your public speaking background is. Please come see Deborah and Elena on table 1. Fill out the form, join the Speakers Bureau. Would love to build up the network.
So I hate to do this, but we have to go to our questions now. We're kind of at the end of the hour here, but there's a lot of things I didn't get to ask you guys, but I know you're going to be around, so we can probably go through some of it later one-on-one. So we want to open up the panel to any questions from the audience. We've got mic runners back there. I see a hand up.
Hi, So when you were talking about, people like white males getting the benefit of a doubt, I've kind of had a reverse experience. I interviewed for a job and I got the offer without even doing a technical interview. And so I was like, wow, I'm just that cool. But then I had a friend who was kind of higher up, and they told me that they don't actually give girls technical interviews. And it felt really weird to me. So I was wondering if any of you guys have run into anything like that.
I've had experiences not with careers, but like if I get expected to speak at a conference, there's that moment where you're like, yay, this is awesome. And then in the back of my mind, I'm saying, well, did they just have a quota to meet? Were there not enough females? Did they want to, am I just filling a slot so they can say, look, diversity? And it's, in a lot of cases, I don't know. Nobody ever told me, yes, that's what they do, but it's something we worry about. And it's, I guess that's another one of those problems. We want to be more diverse, and we want to be more inclusive, but we also want to know that we're bringing good people in with good skills and the right people, and that we're not, saying like the only way that women can do this is simply because they're women, because I think that's an equally bad message to send. So, I hope wherever that company was that they realize that that's not the best hiring practice, and that they just need to open the door for more opportunities and bring more people in for interviews. But it's I think kind of one of the sad catch-22s of this world we're in.
I would agree with that. I face a lot of things being of the consideration of who I know. I face a lot of those where a lot of people go, oh, you just got it because you know so-and-so, or oh, you just got it because you're a female. And so it is hard. And there are a lot of times where I'll go to my superiors and I'll be like, look, am I getting this because I'm a female, or am I getting this because I worked hard for this? I want to know because it matters to me, because I don't want to just get a handout because I'm a female. I don't care if it's because I fit these X boxes or whatever. If I didn't get the job because I qualified, I don't want it. And so as risky as it is and the hard it is, there are those conversations that I've had that if you are only hiring me because I'm a female, I won't take it. And there are a lot of companies where they'll go to me and they'll tell me that I'm the only female getting applied to it. And it's a hard question that I will ask. And it's something that I personally have set myself up for, and that I will take the hit if it's necessary. If I'm only getting it because I'm a female, I won't do it.
So I think differently on this, because I think collectively we're not at a stage where hiring without any kind of quota will get completely equal treatment yet, collectively. Individual experiences may vary. I don't think I ever had an experience of being discriminated against because I'm a woman, or hired because I'm a woman. However, if we don't start to getting women out there, and sometimes we may have to fill a slot because gender. If we don't start doing this, we'll never get to get to a stage where we no longer need to be empowered, right? So the ultimate state of empowerment is we no longer need to be empowered, but we're not quite there yet. So I joined, let me finish. I joined a group in San Francisco where it's a place where you kind of get into this network to be on company boards, right? And there's a lot of women on the network, in the group. And there was a question asked to all of us. If you were asked to be on a company board because you're gender, will you take it? I was asked that question. I said, absolutely, I will take it. Because I know when I join the board, I can make a difference. Even though if they hire me because of my gender, but after that, I will make a difference. So I will disagree on that point. And if you were given an opportunity because of your gender, think about it. Now, could you take that as a position of power to make change afterwards? And if you could, I would urge you to take it.
Yeah. Well,
There's also a difference between entry level and being on a board, though. That there's a lot more opportunities for change. So that's an important consideration.
it's also
Every level, there are opportunities for change.
Yeah, it's also the influence in whether, okay, after they hire you. So me hearing your story makes me think, okay, they were definitely for diversity, but they really weren't trying to be inclusive because they didn't, because it didn't seem that they had concern about you for your background as a person and your value. And I think while I do understand and acknowledge the fact that sometimes you can be that token hire, and that was that was kind of one of the encouraging things people told me about the industry, though it's sad but true. In high school, they were like, you're a double minority, you'll never be without a job. At the same time, you also have to consider, hey, is this environment going to be inclusive for me?
Right.
Even if they do hire me, like after you do the hire and it's like, okay, I'm the only person here, you then have to think about, after a while, it's like, okay, is this company serving my best interests after I've worked there, even if I'm the token hire or not? So sometimes it does happen, but then take into consideration the fact of how they're including you. Because sometimes it may happen and sometimes it may end up well, but then there's other situations where it's not the case.
Any other questions?
Hi. It is on. Hi. First, I just had a quick funny. We were talking about degrees. Well, I have a Master of Library and Information Science degree, and I'm trying to get into security. So, fortunately, I've been very pleased to see that it's after they get off the initial shock of seeing library, then they realize, oh, you know how to find things, you know how to organize things. So that's actually been something I've been trying to work into getting to.
You know what you say about library science? You say information retrieval and data science. That's how you get a job.
Well, my degree is still my degree.
I know, but in the description of the degree, I would encourage you to highlight those aspects.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, I talk about my skill set, and that's what I highlight, but I still can't get rid of the fact that the L word is in the degree title. But most people I found in security understand that doesn't mean I'm skilled at reading books to children, because I could never do that. I've never worked in a public library. But anyway, I guess I just also wanted to mention, we talked a lot about the application process, and there's a really well-known study, I believe that Harvard Business Review published it, and it's some statistics like women won't apply for a job unless they meet something like 60 to 70% of the listed requirements, whereas men will apply if they maybe at the highest meet 30, is what the study found. So I just wanted to mention that to everyone, because it goes in line with what we were talking about. And I guess I didn't really have a question per se, but I just wanted to share that study from Harvard Business Review, because there's a really long article about it, and it's really interesting, and I think it turns out to be motivating to help people apply for things. But this has been a great panel. Thank you.
Question in the back.
Right. Hello, thanks very much. The panel's been really good. So one of the situations that I and my few female colleagues face is that we tend to get wheeled out for a lot of things. So if there are recruitment fairs, then we'll be asked to take part. We get asked to take part in interview panels to help kind of combat stereotype threat. I am always a bit conflicted about this, because on the one hand, I understand the importance of role models, and I want to encourage as many women as possible to feel comfortable with applying for us. But on the other side, it's taking time away from my technical work. So I am not demonstrating my technical competence to the various other people around me. So I was wondering if you had experienced similar things, and whether you could comment on what one might be able to do about that.
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that.
Can I, Iman?
Sure, go ahead.
So I have personal experience with this right now because, with me just recently joining GitHub and me also being passionate about community and being the change that I want to see, at the same time, it's like, okay, I have to find the balance of also doing work and finding that balance and doing like POCs with Rapid7, wink, wink. And being able to do the work and get up to speed. And the best advice I can give to you is, from my perspective, is basically use your best judgment, and also think about is your company just doing this just so they can show, oh, we have diversity, or do they really care about diversity and inclusion being their bottom line? If they're only doing this once off and they're not asking you about other things, like for for me, the thing I like about GitHub is like, it's not just the conference stuff they ask about. They ask about many of the community events we're doing. They're like, hey, can you come down and speak with people? So it's just not just, you know, one-off things for just specifically recruiting or specifically for conference speaking. It's kind of just all over the place. So that's two things to keep in mind. Is like, find your own balance. Remember that work is a priority, but at the same time, ask yourself, is your company invested in the diversity just from one standpoint, or are they well-rounded in it?
So what you're being asked to do is community service, kind of, right? So you got to balance what your core responsibilities with community service. So equal respect is my community service. And while I have a full-time job at the C-level in the company, RSA Week was the best example. I was trying to run Equal Respect. We were distributing T-shirts. We were trying to organize breakfast. We did a breakfast. At the same time, my staff was closing $1 million deals. I had to go meet with customers. What do? I drop balls. You know, there's no way around it. I forgot to order my son's school lunch that week and forgot to tell my husband that I didn't order them. So on Monday, RSA Monday, my son showed up at school without lunch. So I felt really guilty, but you drop balls. So going back to the point is, you do have to find a balance, but if you have the time to do community service, please do, because we need it. Even a little bit of your effort is appreciated.
Question, Beth?
Thank you all. I was just wondering if you all can elaborate on some of the successful examples of inclusion and retention that you've seen in different companies.
Janisha? Start with it.
Oh man. So some of the successful things I've seen is just, again, companies being supportive and empathetic. It's also seen a very diverse community within the company. And I'm going back to GitHub again because they probably have the most diverse background and company of people that I've ever seen. And most people are very, very open about it. That's the difference. Because at my previous company, we did have a diverse background of people, but you usually talked about it at lunch in hushed tones. You never talked about it in the office because people were afraid because all of our management was male. But like at GitHub, the difference is that I have, as a queer woman of color, to be able to have communities that are both queer and Black in the same building and have a sizable portion, it was kind of magical for me, because I was like, I have people who relate to me on so many levels, and that was, and to be out in the open about it and not have to kind of worry about, is somebody going to get offended that I talk about this, or is somebody going to be creeped out because, I am queer and, they may not want to talk about queer things, and so, I'm able to just talk with people and relate to people, and I feel like it's good for me. So that's a level of inclusion when you have companies that not only have people of various backgrounds, but they feel comfortable being themselves. I feel that's a huge thing.
So I have a concrete example of inclusion, not on the race side minority, but on the salary gap. So we all have read studies of average women's salary is lower than average men's salary, right? And different industry may have different statistics. So I was at Intel Security, I was a hiring manager, I was running a team, and I had open recs and they had salary bands, right? Obviously, we don't say there's no salary band, particular salary band for women, for a guy, they all just a salary band, right? So I'm hiring person, I could hire a guy or a woman, and I'll hire them, and I look at what they're making now, and I add 15 or 20%, whatever is, I want to attract the candidate, and I would make the offer. Then I was talking to other hiring managers, they do the same thing, right? It's not like a woman, they will offer less. And then we read those statistics and we said, why is the case? Because when we do the offering, we don't discriminate against a woman candidate or a guy. Why across the industry that there's a gap? So later, I was talking to a lot of people and kind of figure out one of the reasons why women's salary tend to be lower is women are not as good at negotiating the first salary. Right? When your entry level is low, when you move to a different job, you're entering at a lower level. Even if they give you a bump, 15% bump or 20% bump, the same as the other candidate, you started lower. So what a company should do is periodically they should say, okay, so I'm going to forget about what they were making before. I'm going to look at everybody, the employee base. I'm going to look at their skill set, at where they are they being paid the same? And this is what Benioff did for Salesforce. He spent $3 million, 30 million? I think it was $3 million putting in to fill the salary gap of women at the same level as men, right? So that's a concrete exercise that you could do without thinking, oh, I'm being equal because I'm offering her 15% over and him 15% over, but rather taking a different approach and truly putting equality into the business process. And I hear Salesforce is going to be doing that every few years so that the incoming population will get the same. And I think that's a wonderful example of diversity as part of your business process.
I have one of the best things I love about our company is that they really care about the whole person. It's not just like you're hiring you for this job and do this job and your life and what you care about and your family or what you do on the weekends. That doesn't matter. There's you mentioned when there's a sort of crisis event or even if it's, a large-scale crisis that they know impacted you, and just the fact that they know it impacted you is important. But they, take time out to say, "Oh, hey, we care about you as a person, and we want to make sure you're okay and you're well taken care of because how you feel impacts your work, and we want you to be happy so that we're all successful." Some of the ways I've seen people even do that is that we'll have kind of different work functions or events. And what I love is that they're really diverse. You can have like a wine tasting thing, or wear your old school rock t-shirts to work day, or, okay, we're all getting together, we're gonna play these video games. And it's never marketed like, hey ladies, let's go do this because we're women. It's like, here's the thing that anybody at this company might like, and we're gonna encourage you to participate. And I really like that because it really leaves the choice to you. Nobody's dictating what should be important to me or what I should want to be involved in. There's just lots of opportunities for me to feel connected to my coworkers and people across the whole company. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I was going to say you can start small too. With my team, there have been times where we would all go out to lunch together, granted something small, but you're still being included. You're still building that fostering for your team building. And then we've had bigger things where our company says, hey, at a discounted rate, we bought tickets for this water park. You pay $10 and the whole staff can go to this water park. So it's kind of just them giving back. But you don't have to think about it in a grand level too. If you want to have more inclusion, the best way to do is start with you. How can you impact your team? How can you impact your department? How can you impact your company? Find those small things. It starts with one small thing and you can grow those things, the bigger the people, and sometimes your company, if they see you start building those things, will get behind it and help support it.
So full disclosure, I actually work for Black Hat. And one of the questions we have when it comes to inclusion is how do conferences actually do a better job of including powerful women like you? How do we do a better job of outreach? And if you have any concrete examples, whether it's RSA, whether it's B-Sides, whether it's DEF CON, of somebody who's doing something right or something that you'd really like to see, we want to know what it is. So I would just ask all of you, what could we be doing better, specifically at Black Hat, to make this more a part of the community?
I think this right here, you guys opened up a forum to allow people to speak where we come from all different things. Granted, I'm, a volunteer here as an associate and I've been for the last 3 years, but even still, you don't market these classes to just males. When you guys have, different ideas for people to come in and teach, you guys have your own panel where you discuss what those subject matters are, who's your teachers, and I'm sure that you have, references of, is this person good? You're not just disqualifying females. If they're skilled enough, they can teach, and I think that's a big part of it, but opening up different ideas areas where this forum can happen, where you have different meetings where, yes, it's all women, but this wasn't just for all women. Men are here too. Men were allowed to come eat, but it was just women speakers. So it opens up the idea to build diversity. So this right here, I think, is a prime example of what you're doing well.
Another,
Oh, CFPs are, oh yeah.
yes, there should be a briefing.
CFPs are one area that I was actually looking at. There's a big one that's due tomorrow, yay. And I was looking over the different tracks, and you can pick like general track, intermediate, and advanced. And if you look at the descriptions of those and what you're asking for, general is like, oh, overviews and case studies and bigger picture things. And then advanced is like code, show your tool. And that is very much slanting your, the focus to say that the only way to be advanced in security is to have that one very specific job set. You can be advanced across the board. You can be advanced in all different areas of security, but that shows kind of still a clear bias, and that's going to influence where people submit. It's going to influence how they decide what they want to talk about, and I think that's kind of an unconscious way that we are cutting down on diversity.
Another thing that I kind of wanted to ask, especially as being an organizer for for smaller conferences too, one of the things I've seen in smaller conferences and some bigger ones too is having diversity scholarships. And I know, and what separates diversity scholarships from regular student scholarships is that it's going for those who either may be just curious about the industry or and can't afford it themselves, or their manager won't approve of them going, or in the case of my background, like 7 years ago, being somebody of a disadvantaged background in the middle of nowhere who's working a job but can't afford a $2,000 conference. But having those, and I know even bigger conferences like Velocity is started to ask sponsors to actually be like, do you want to do sponsorship specifically for scholarships? So that's one thing that I've seen and has worked for some conferences to get some diversity into the door.
Second, that scholarship thing. I have two things specifically I think Black Hat could do things a little bit differently. One is expanding the program to include security topics that really speak to human interest versus just hacking, right? So a lot of taking hold of your iPhone, great, but what impact does it have for a human that could be the owner of the phone? Encourage and potentially have encourage the PC to look at submissions that have human interest and it'll help attract a more diverse audience. The other one is, I think Black Hat has a very loyal following and loyal audience, but some of the outbound communications don't reach outside of that audience. So I would encourage the organizers think about how to step outside of that audience and get the message out a little bit more.
Is there any more questions?
Yes, couple.
Okay, I have time for one more question.
First of all, hey, Devil Dog, thanks.
Hoorah.
So you guys mentioned that one person, especially if it's a visible individual or someone in a leadership role, can really affect the tenor of the whole company.
Yes.
And can scare off really good talent that helps achieve mission success because either they feel they don't belong or it's a threatening environment. As middle class white male in the late 30s, I'm probably least aware of some of the shadow I cast because I haven't had to think about it as much of the time for as long. How do we start to see ourselves without bias, and how do we start to make sure we're taking our own temperature and know whether we're at risk of either attracting or scaring off both the individuals that are going to help us achieve mission success and the categories of individuals that we might not be tapping into enough of?
I think a big one for that is to examine yourself and look at, okay, does everyone have this same level of playing field? If they don't, am I more ahead of someone or am I less ahead of someone? And so it's nice to think about, for me, that I like social engineering. Okay, so that's one of my hobbies. Okay, not everyone has that same background. So I go dial back and I'm like, okay, here's my litmus test. Where is most people at? And I think that's an easier way to deal with it. I'm white as well. I know that I have probably more opportunities, to be honest, than a lot of other people. So, and same thing, I'm a female. With people with EEO, I get more things because I'm a female. I look at that and I go, okay, again, where am I at because of the company? Where am I filling a quota? Am I doing these things? So it's just a lot of why questions. Am I this? Am I that? How can I change those things to be more inclusive, to be more open? And so it's just one of those things to examine yourself, examine the things, and think about in a more broader sense of where are other people.
One thing I want to add is to pretty much take yourself out of the picture. And that is really hard for some people. That's even hard for me sometimes because we all have this ego that, wants to be stroked all the time, but sometimes we have to say, no, it's not about me right now. I'm going to set myself aside and I'm going to focus on what this person needs. And it's a simple thing that people can do, but it's also one of the most hardest. So that's one thing that I've seen leadership in past companies that I've worked on and past management that I've been to, where it's like sometimes they can't set that ego to the side. Sometimes they can't set themselves aside and be like, okay, this company is bigger than me. This company is not just me. I am a part of it, but other people are critical to its success. So being able to set yourself aside and listen to a different perspective and try to understand the different perspective, even if you don't necessarily agree with it, just being able to listen and have empathy and acknowledge that it's there is huge. So.
If you want to ask, we can repeat the question.
Hi, my name is Elena Elkin. I'm one of the co-founders for Women in Security and Privacy. And I also serve on the board of directors for another nonprofit, Leading Women in Technology. And recently we had a heated discussion with other women, female board members regarding numerous nonprofit and for-profit organizations that are dedicated to advancing women in different fields. And the question that we all talked about was, do we dilute our value in the community by creating new organizations that are helping women versus combining our efforts and expanding existing organizations by creating new chapters around the country, around the globe, versus creating new organizations? So I'm just very curious, what do you think, if this is something that helps us or this is something that dilutes our value and we help women less by creating new organizations?
So for me personally, and again, it always depends. There are always situations where if your goals and align exactly what you're trying to do align, maybe it makes sense to join forces. But I think that all different organizations offer people different opportunities. Even if your focus is, I'm going to help support and encourage women in this industry, you're going to do it a different way than another organization would have a different focus. And really, you're there to serve the people who need your help. And by giving them more options and having more things available, it means, first of all, you reach more people. Some of the different groups that I'm hearing about today, I might have heard, oh, yeah, I heard someone mention that, or, oh, I hadn't heard of that one before. Let me go look it up. But the more there are, the more likely it is someone's going to hear. And the more likely it is that someone's going to find something that is a good fit for them. Because again, there's not one way to reach people. There's lots of different ways. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, I do think if there is one thing that's more important, because I'm in agreement with having different groups, is that, some of these groups have different partnerships. Like, for instance, I know a lot of the POC groups in the Bay Area, they tend to sometimes team up to do things together, or they'll sometimes share speakers from their different orgs. So that is one way that, you know, a team up thing would be good. So I wouldn't necessarily say too segmented, but at the same time, if there is going to be segmentation, have there be connection and community too.
Yeah, I think
don't lose that part.
Yeah, connection and community is really important. I do see a lot of different efforts, but I think every effort has really good intentions of what to do. I think when it comes to a time when there's a conflict, that's when some of the egos come out. And I think if there's conflict, let's all take a step back and say, it's not about my brand that matters. It's about collectively what we do for the community. Even if my brand doesn't get recognized or my effort doesn't get recognized here, that's fine, as long as somebody's doing the work. And I think that is really hard to do at some point when you're putting so much work into your organization, whatever that is. But the perspective really is how we help the entire industry, not about how you help your own brand. And that, I think, is really important to keep in mind.
Okay, so I'm going to hold off on the questions right now because we're getting ready to go to another phase of this, if you don't mind. We have special groups here who are having tabletop discussions, and we'll have them introduce themselves. You can go talk to them. The speakers are still going to be here. But I first want to thank these women because I learned so much today from them. And I was really excited about most of them I'd known in advance, but hadn't met in person and talked to. But I thought they brought so much perspective here that I had not seen before in one place, and I hope that was helpful to you too. They're going to hang out for questions as well, so feel free to talk to them. But I'm going to let the tabletop folks talk about what they're going to be doing. And actually, Rebecca, you have a tabletop, so I'm going to let you go first.
I think I'm going to be at am I at table 3 or table 4? Which one is my name on that one? All right, I'm at table 3.
Table 3.
And we talked about it a lot on the panel, but training and if you have any questions, if you're trying to find out opportunities, whether it's, official academic based or community based, we're going to be at table 3, kind of talking through some of those. And if you have ideas for new training opportunities we could do either at conferences or in your community, please come forward as well. And I would love to hear more about those.
Okay, and there's a mic going around.
I have a tabletop too.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chensi, you do too? That's right. Sorry, go ahead. I forgot. Go ahead.
So I'm at table 1. I'm partnering up with WISP. We're doing a speakers bureau. I said earlier, I'd love to take your information if you're interested in becoming a speaker in some of the conferences that we partner with. Even if you just want to get trained on being a public speaker, we'd love to talk to you. So table 1 is Equal Respect Speakers Bureau.
Okay, I know there's some other folks. If you could raise your hand so they could bring the mic over so you can say what you're doing. If you bring a mic over so they can talk about what their topic will be. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Lisa Jiggets, founder and CEO of the Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu. Our topic is the ABCs of getting in and succeeding in the field of cybersecurity. We do these talks. My partner in crime here, Marcel, she's a badass. She is now in her new role of a malware analyst, and I wanted her to come because we're going to speak about different paths that we took. She's a non-techie. She came from a non-tech field. I came the traditional path of, I knew when I was 13 I wanted to be a hacker. So we'll bring that different perspective to the table and how we think, the majority of the industry is looking at folks getting in and how to succeed. So I don't know our table though.
There's one over there, I think.
You know what table she's at?
There's cards on them. I don't know off the top of my head which one's which, but there's somebody else that wanted to introduce their table as well.
Hello, I'm Terry Morielli, and I'm with the National Center for Women in Information Technology, and I'm at the wrong table. Or else we're going to change tables. I'm going to host a discussion about unconscious bias. We have a team of social scientists at our organization, and we build resources for community members who are interested in changing the cultures within their organizations. And so we have resources on unconscious bias. So if you're interested in learning more about unconscious bias and what you can do to stem it, you can come talk to me now at this table.
Excellent. Okay, we've got a few more over there.
Hi, I'm Michelle Kwan. I'm with the Cyber Diversity Foundation. We're a foundation, a new nonprofit, and we Our focus is on inclusion of diversity in the cybersecurity workforce. And our talk today is the myth of work-life balance.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Claypool. I'm with the Executive Women's Forum and Alta Associates. The EWF is the largest organization for women in security, risk, and privacy. We're about 14 years old. We host a national conference every year, as well as regional meetings and cheer dinners. And today, I'm going to be talking about sponsoring women and hiring diverse teams.
Did we get everybody? Oh, we got one more over here.
I'm not hosting a table. I want our discussion. My name's Joe Voya. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the City of San Francisco. 50% of my team is minority and women represented. And
good for you.
I have several positions open. I am looking for SOC engineer. I am architect. I am engineer, security program manager, and 2 IT auditors that will sit in my cybersecurity staff. If you know of anyone, stop by.
Excellent. All right, so feel free to move around the room and join the different tabletop discussions, or if you want us to speak to some of our speakers, we're all going to be hanging out here for a while. And again, thank you so much for coming, and keep the conversation going.
If you didn't get an equal respect pin, we have pins on that table, so please come by for a pin. And grab a handful to distribute wherever you are.
The pins are awesome. Okay, thank you.